Okay, let's dive into something genuinely weird about the human mind. We're going to explore this really strange puzzle of moral outrage, especially when, on the surface, there's no clear victim. It's a question that gets right to the core of how we're wired. We tend to think that morality is all about preventing harm, right? But is it really? Let's look at a few scenarios that are going to really challenge that idea. So, picture this. Someone buys a flag, takes it into their own backyard where absolutely no one can see them, and they burn it. Nobody's physically hurt, no property is damaged except their own, and yet, for a lot of people, this just feels instinctively deeply wrong. The question is, why? All right, let's ramp it up a notch. Imagine two adult siblings. They decide to have a sexual relationship. It's fully consensual, they use protection so there's no chance of children, and they keep it completely secret. Again, you have to ask, where is the harm? Who is the actual victim here? But that feeling of moral wrongness for most of us is just undeniable. And for the grand finale, and yes, this comes from actual psychological research, a family buys a chicken from the supermarket. Before they cook it, they have sex with the dead bird. Then they cook it thoroughly and eat it for dinner. I know, it's bizarre, it's definitely offensive, but is anyone actually harmed? The chicken was already dead. The family's fine. This, right here, is the puzzle of harmless wrongs. To solve this puzzle, we need to look at the basic template our mind uses to even understand right and wrong in the first place. And you know what? It's probably simpler than you think. It's called the moral dyad. Now, that sounds a little academic, but think of it as the fundamental blueprint for morality that's kind of hardwired into our brains. For something to even register as a moral event, our mind automatically looks for two key players. And here they are. It's super simple. First, you've got an agent. That's the one doing the action. And second, you have a patient. That's the one who's being harmed, the victim. An agent hurts a patient. That is the classic default structure of a moral wrong inside our heads. Simple, right? But that, of course, brings us right back to our puzzle. What happens when we see an act that feels really wrong, but we can't find the victim? What happens when that patient part of the template is just missing? Well, our brain does something pretty remarkable. It goes on a hunt. Yeah, when a victim isn't obvious, our mind doesn't just give up and move on. It kicks off this fascinating, totally unconscious process to find one. And here it is. This is the solution to the whole mystery. It's a process called dyadic completion. The key takeaway is this. Our mind's need for a victim is so powerful that when one isn't obviously there, it will literally invent one. It does this to complete the picture, to make the moral violation make sense. Let's see how this actually works with our examples. For the flag burning, the mind creates these abstract victims, right? It's not a person, it's veterans or the nation. For the incest example, the victim becomes society's moral fabric. And for that bizarre chicken scenario, the victim becomes an abstract idea like human dignity. You see, our brains just refuse to accept a wrong without a victim. And look, this isn't just a neat idea somebody came up with. It's actually backed by some pretty incredible research that shows just how automatic and powerful this victim-finding instinct really is. One key study is just fascinating. Researchers gave people these harmless wrong scenarios, and they explicitly told them, hey, just so you know, no one was harmed in this situation. But did that matter? Nope, not at all. A huge percentage of the participants still insisted on identifying a victim, which just proves that this drive to find a victim often steamrolls the actual facts. And it gets even more extreme. In one study, researchers looked at what is probably the most clearly victimless act imaginable, private masturbation, and participants still managed to find victims. They would name God or society or even the person's future romantic partners as being harmed by the act. Our minds will go to some pretty incredible lengths to complete that dyad. So the big question is, why? Why are we wired this way? Why this relentless, almost illogical hunt for a victim when there isn't one? Well, the answer seems to be rooted deep in our evolutionary past. It really comes down to a kind of better safe than sorry principle. For our ancestors, missing a real threat was way more dangerous than seeing a threat that wasn't actually there. An action that seemed harmless could have been a secret signal for disease or social instability or that a person was unreliable. So we evolved a moral system that's hypersensitive. It's biased toward finding harm, just in case. And there's a social reason for it too. Sharing moral outrage, even over something that's totally victimless, is a really powerful way to signal that you're part of the group. It helps enforce shared norms, and it makes those social bonds stronger. Okay, so that's the ancient history. Now let's see how this ancient mental software is running on our modern hardware, because this isn't just some academic curiosity. Dyadic completion is actively shaping our world right now.
Once you know what to look for, you see it everywhere. It helps explain why we have public support for laws against so-called victimless crimes like drug use or gambling. It's a huge engine for political polarization, where each side gets better and better at framing what the other side does as harming some newly invented victim. And it's absolutely a key mechanism in online cancel culture, where the outrage often depends on identifying victims in old jokes, art, or past statements.
Yeah, once you see it, you really can't unsee it. So much of our political and social debate isn't about if harm happened, but a battle over who the real victim is. Each side is just completing that moral diet in a different way. So, what do we do with all this? Well, understanding this little quirk of our moral minds gives us a really powerful tool for thinking more clearly and hopefully having better conversations. So, let's boil it down. Here are the key takeaways. First, our minds are basically built to resist the very idea of a harmless wrong. Our gut feeling often overrides logic. Second, this whole process of dyadic completion, it's an automatic reflex. It's not a reasoned choice we make. And finally, it's not just a flaw or a bug in our thinking, it's a feature that served a real evolutionary purpose. So how can you actually use this? First step, self-awareness. When you feel that spark of moral outrage, just pause and ask yourself, is my brain inventing a victim right now? Second step, critical thinking. Is the harm that I'm seeing real and tangible, or is it abstract and constructed? And third, try to have better dialogue. Focus conversations on actual, measurable consequences, not just on dueling gut feelings. And all of this leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought to chew on. If our brains are designed to invent victims to justify punishment, then we have to ask a really tough question. When we create laws and social punishments for acts that are truly harmless, who becomes the actual, real-life victim then?